people say meet people where they are, which I know sounds, cliche, but if somebody's willing to let you, take care of their wound, maybe tomorrow they'll be willing for something else.
Yo, I'm Bryce the Third.
And I'm Liz McKean.
And you are now tuned in to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. Here we dive into all the recovery stories from around the world.
And we talk about all pathways because there's no one right way to recover.
If you've been with us for a while, you know how powerful stories are. So get ready for your community to get just a little bigger today.
We are so glad that you're here. Let's get into the show.
What's up, everybody? This is probably the point that I would say, what's up, Liz? And then Liz would say, hey, Bryce, and be surprised at how I said, what's up, Liz? Because she's still not used to diving straight into not having to do our intro anymore. But we're going to skip all of that because Liz is not here. Boo-hoo. I'm crying on the inside and out. But I think my outside is crying because I didn't eat my entire lunch and is sitting here looking at me right now. But I really wanted to get into this conversation that I've been super excited to have with my guest today. My guest today is Sharon Donnelly. Sharon is the president of the Teddy Kradzinski Foundation and a registered nurse and certified case manager. Sharon has personal experience in navigating the healthcare system in partnership with her son, Teddy, as he worked to find and utilize resources for treatment of SUD and anxiety. Through these experiences, including losing Teddy to an accidental fentanyl overdose, Sharon has gained a deeper understanding of the challenges and lack of resources available for individuals with substance use disorder. And as you can all tell, I read that verbatim, which I asked Sharon before we started. Like, some people like me to read it verbatim, some don't. But I figured I'd go ahead and read it verbatim, and then we dive in from there. But first and foremost, Sharon, welcome to the show. How is your energy?
Thank you. My energy is good. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have a conversation, and I'm excited to talk about my experience, and also shed some light on my perception of Teddy's experience in the way that we partner things, and what I'm trying to do now, and have a renewed sense of purpose.
Yeah. It's always amazing to me when I hear about advocates who may not necessarily have the personal experience with substance use disorder, but have been impacted and affected. And there's a lot of times where we'll have conversation in the community and people will feel like their voice matters less, or their voice isn't as powerful or as important. But what I've come to discover is no, it's not like you have space here. It's like your space is reserved. We need your advocacy and your story, because this thing doesn't just impact those who it directly affects. It impacts the community. And from just the surface of your story, it seems as if it really impacted your community. And so I'd like to initially just dig into how we got here, and who Teddy was, and who you are, and what brought about the work that you do now.
Okay. Well, I'm Teddy's mom, and Teddy, he grew up outside the Philadelphia area. That's, where I live. And I'd say, relatively, I would just say normal childhood. I don't know what that looks like anymore, but he went to school here. He went to his high school. He went to LaSalle College High School, and he did well in school. He always was we used to always call him a member of the opposition because he could debate anything. Spirited conversations. He was an avid musician, writer. Actually, I guess I can say it now, he had his own little side gig at LaSalle College High School, I understand. Service of others in writing papers to help others do as well in their classes as he was doing. But he was a happy kid, but he also, also struggled with anxiety even in high school. I would say, growing up again, did sports, went to parties. What I would say, in my experience, what a lot of kids do, He certainly, I know, experimented with, for sure, marijuana and alcohol. And probably, I would say, mushrooms.
Mm.
But from my perspective, from what I see, and even looking back, I would say it was a casual use. Maybe a little more than that with the pot. I mean, back then it was, the old fashioned rolled up the joint, and I believe that, that was maybe an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated from high school. He was in the National Honor Society. Went on to Temple University in Philly, and went to college. His freshman year, it seemed okay. Came home his sophomore year, and there was stuff from my perspective going on I didn't understand. He came home, was getting up in the middle of the night, getting in the bathtub, doing some stuff that I wasn't fully understanding, and unfortunately, around June, I think that was about 2012, he was addicted to Oxy. He had gotten a pill at a party. From what I can tell, casual use. And then I do, because he definitely had anxiety, had something that happened in his life with a relationship with a girlfriend. And I think things started from there with his relationship with opioids. So when he came home, we were kind of like, okay. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I'm a parent, and honestly had no understanding other than I have case management experience in the insurance world, so I knew about going to inpatient rehab and all of those pieces. So we were able to do that, and at the time thought that that's kind of the beginning of getting better. And you go to rehab, and then you do this, and then and that is obviously a very not really could be further from the truth. So when he went to rehab, he left, and eventually got a call from a policeman just saying, if you could come pick him up, if not, I'm going to have to take him.
So I just kind of want to jump in, because when you said that, Teddy was getting up in the middle of the night, getting in the bathtub, stuff that you didn't really understand, but now you look back with, the luxury of hindsight to know that, those were some of the first signs. Was there a open communication in this time where it's like, hey, mom, I'm going through these things, or this is some of the stuff I'm dealing with? Or when you get to the point to where you're starting to go to, the rehabilitation centers, is that a collaborative conversation, or what?
It was not a collaborative conversation in the beginning. I think he on his own, because I didn't realize exactly what was happening. He on his own was trying these things, like getting the tub and trying to do things to, basically wean himself off of the Oxy. Eventually, it was out in the open, but it was wasn't in a sit down conversation. It was more of a heated argument that it came out that this is what was going on. Which at the time, when I look back now, I know I was like, what the? And I think he was almost like, so him going to rehab at that time was like, well, this is what you have to do. And I know now, I mean, the benefit of so much hindsight, and even during, during Teddy's lifetime, we would talk that there's things that you can do and go to, but if you're not ready to do those things, you're just going through the motions. So there was definitely a lot of going through the motions. He came home, he did a partial program, and started back at school, which it's funny, because Temple's in an area in the city of Philadelphia, it's very urban, and I had some people say, I don't know why you would have let him go back there. And I just don't see it that way. I think that I don't know how to put it, that he was going to school there. What happened is eventually when he was running out of money, he transitioned from oxy to heroin.
Yeah. I hear that a lot.
And then it was a really crazy ride, because he didn't want to stop. And, he came home, tried to do the house, rules things. And, I was trying to figure out, just to learn things and just to, I guess, set perspective. Like for me, part of my job was doing what we called care coordination. So I would sometimes help facilitate getting, at work people that perhaps need to then get into an acute rehab. I didn't do any of the review per se, but I knew the process. And even with all that, it was so very overwhelming. And so we really had, like Teddy had years where he would have take a semester off from school, and then he'd have 18 months of, doing well, and then lapse. We had situations where, he was sleeping under a train, overpass. My brother found him. I went down and he didn't want to come home with me. That was really hard. And just trying to getting him, he was able to get connected to resources, or say he had gone, because he had been to rehab inpatient several times. But then it's you do this, you go, and then everything's just so fragmented. And what do you do?
Yeah.
Meetings, partial, all these things. And I feel like we were fortunate that he was even able to have access to some of these services. There's a lot of people that don't have access, and nobody seems to, sometimes get the sense almost when someone's inpatient, it's okay, they got to go. So that was just kind of a hamster wheel, honestly.
Yeah.
And he had times when I could see the shift in his mind, so that he was purposeful in living in recovery. And then also times when he was going through the motions, or times when, he was doing things that, trying to sell his own clothes. He tried to sell his own clothes at one of the stores, and they wouldn't take it because they were in such bad shape. So he came back to my house and took all his sister's stuff. So there was, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm just trying to think of things. It's funny now that I look back, because Teddy did have 3 good years in recovery, living in recovery. And I'm really grateful for that, because we really got to know each other, not just me, but my husband, my daughters. I got to see him, be the person that I know he was.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that, because I know a lot of people don't get that chance as family members.
Yeah.
But during that time, he ended up, was a 12 stepper, and that's what worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
But times before that, it was, and it's funny because like I think about how I feel bad about, have some, of course, regret if you could do something differently, but nobody beat themselves up more than he did. An internal dialogue. And I guess I'll ask you, but I feel like in some of the connections that I have now, that I feel that to be true. That the individual that's going through it and working hard and trying to do, wherever they are, their own internal dialogue, I think is worse than anything maybe that somebody else could say.
Yeah, I would definitely say so, especially, the experience of having I personally haven't had the experience of having to, and they say relapse.
Yeah.
That hasn't been my experience, but I know why I used,
Right.
and a lot of that has to do with like rumination or self-judgment, or not understanding like why I think the way that I think, and everybody else looks like they got it all figured out, and that can be a lot. And then to build a life in which through non-use of chemicals or alcohol, like I learned to be able to show up for that. What really struck me was when you said like I seen the click in his mind where he was really like tapped in and intentional about recovery. And I'm coming up on 12 years. I'm a 12 stepper too. And
congratulations, that's great.
Thank you. And there's times where I'm super on fire about recovery and about intentionality and about showing up and learning more and building process to allow me to show up for life on life's terms. And then there's other times where like I'm living life. Like I live life, and then there's chaos, and there's other people having breakdowns, and there's unfair things that happen, and so, and also the things that I lean on now are like, if I was still using the same things that I had day one, my recovery has had to evolve with the way that I've been able to show up for life. The longer I live, the more life I'm exposed to, the more actually, because now like I'm a responsible person, like people leave me with their kids, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so now there's more responsibility. And so now it's pertinent that I can continue to build my recovery resources, because I can't sustain my life today off of what it is that I came in with on day one.
Yeah, that is really true. And finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And
learning how to work it too. 'Cause we're human. So one thing that I've been experiencing recently is, well, not recently, but like it's at first it's black and white. Like I was this and now I'm this. And so as long as I'm this, I'm good.
Yep.
But I've had experiences like I'm resentful of the fact that I'm unique in the way that I have to do this extra work to be compassionate and understanding. And those who don't have my ailment, my disease, like it looks like they don't have to do all this work to be able to show up for other people and show up for life and be considerate and be understanding and be compassionate. Then I'll have like these compassion fatigue moments where like I have to, like, it doesn't feel as black and white, like, oh, I'm a good person, I do this, or I'm a bad person, I do that. It's like, no, like in order to take care of myself, I have to set a boundary with a loved one, or in order to take care of myself, I have to not do so much of the things that I love. And, we need, I think community is the biggest thing. Like we need community of people who are having similar experiences that can guide us along the way and show us that we're not alone in that.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that, because from my perspective with Teddy, when he would have like 18 months, and then I just say an elapse, because my thing is that you don't throw out that time. It's still experience. And then would go through some really rough periods. Like I said, like he would be on the street or couch surfing or whatever, and then kind of come back. But, and then had another 18 months and then a lapse. And that lapse was, I can still remember it. And I'm looking in my family room now. I was in there, and he was not, hadn't used anything yet. But I think from what I understand now, a lapse can occur, 3 months before it actually physically occurs. Mindset, change in, perhaps routine, et cetera. And he sat on the couch and he looked at me and he said, I'm going to Kensington and I'm going to use. And from a parent's perspective, and from even being in the room, say, with some of the support groups, as far as, all along, you got to kick them out. You got to kick them out. And I had finally said, and my husband and I had really gone through it, which that work that we did then served us really well now, was I finally said, until I can put my head down on the pillow at night, that's when I'll know. And in that moment, and there were no raised voices, we just sat there and I just said, Teddy, if that's the case, I can't have you live here anymore. And it wasn't, but in that moment, and I feel like we both felt that, and of course I'm saying my perspective, it wasn't like I'm holding that over his head. That's not what it felt like at that point. It was sort of it was a parting of it was a very, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And just, those times he didn't want, and I'm, grateful because with his life and journey, he fortunately did not have any legal ramifications through his many, his journey.
Yeah.
And he graduated from college, which I know he wanted to do. And I said to him that, you really, with everything, you're working and fighting for living in recovery. And even though a lot of people don't recognize, and I would say even more so back, 2012, 2013, 14, 15, that you have an illness and a condition, just like if somebody has another illness or condition and you were able to graduate. And then finally, he'd been to rehab, I'm going to say 11 or 12 times, inpatient. And I'm going to be real honest. When he was inpatient, especially the latter times, and he had a willingness to go, even if it wasn't, say, 100%, it was, from my perspective, a relief, because I knew he was somewhere and he was safe, even if it wasn't, I know this might sound crazy, for a long time, or even if it's not going to produce the path that I wanted, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of was. And eventually what happened was he in 2018, he he just he decided, and he was went to live at a recovery home, and he was doing his work. And then a little bit later in the year, he had the job, was living with his best friend, and he was in a band, musicians, and he overdosed, but they had Narcan, and thankfully he went into inpatient rehab, came out, and that's where I think his journey began, for the 3 years where I could really see a difference in his, like you were saying, like he just always felt, and he was a writer too, and so I had the fortunateness of being able to look at that he was getting a lot out of also giving to others, was giving him even more reward than what he was getting.
Yeah.
And so he had a band, Apple Juice Jones, and yoga teacher. And for him, the spiritual grounding, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, sense of community. As I said, even he was with his 12-step community. He was very interested in wanting to sponsor and be active in yoga. He also taught in what they called recovery yoga. He just really wanted to do all that, plus pursue the band. And he was really living a really great, from my perspective, he was living the way he wanted to live in a healthy fashion. Now, listen, it's not all, as sunshine, but he was seeing a therapist. He was he had good friends in the room that his home group, book club. He was doing a lot of things. He still, I know, had underlying anxiety, but at the same time, he was performing self-care to want to manage that. He didn't want to go on medicine or anything like that. So,
I got a question. So, you mentioned the moment where Teddy said, "Hey, I'm going to Kensington," and you set that boundary, and I know you were having a little bit of trouble articulating like what space that came from, but I kind of felt that space, because it's not no judgment on you, and it seems as if you had built, as hard as it was and as heartbreaking as it was, a relationship with what it is that you knew you had to do to take care of yourself. Because when you're in these predicaments where it's like, hey, and it doesn't sound crazy at all to hear that when Teddy went to rehab, that like you were able to. I've been told when I heard you was in jail, at least I knew where you were.
Yeah.
Like I've heard so many different stories, like where it's like that's not the predicament that you would like for them to be in, but at least I know that they're not on the street, and I'm not going to get a call when I wake up in the morning, and when Teddy started to string a longer term recovery together, was your spirit completely set, or how was that experience for you as mom? Like, was there always like, I
can definitely speak to that. In the beginning, for sure, when I say in the beginning of what I'm going to say, the last 3 years, ended up being the last 3 years of Teddy's life, I was still in the waiting for the other shoe to drop. And feeling a lot of my own anxiety. So for me, I started to see somebody in therapy because of the realization of the trauma and that how I was reacting, and that I knew I was just having a really hard time, even though I could see by Teddy's just the change in his behavior. I saw the light in his eyes. That's how I'm going to explain it, because I had only seen that maybe one other time before that. But for me, I just, every day I was like, okay, well, I have to say like 3 Hail Marys. I have to do this. I have to do that in order for, which is totally not rational, but anxiety. So I decided I went, and I also wanted to get help because it was just taking over everything in me. And I'm not then available for myself, others. You know, I have 2 other children, my husband, other family members, friends, and I'm not available for Teddy either. So I would say probably maybe like within the first year, I started to kind of feel like, okay, like this is kind of getting going, like just because I just could see from my perspective growth in Teddy, not just as far as even him putting the work in every day to do what he needs to do to maintain his goals with sobriety and recovery, but as a person. Like I could just see he was kind or caring. I know this sounds silly and I don't mean it that way. Like I knew it was there, but all of a sudden I used to also think, okay, well, this is kind of all coming together. He's like 26 and, it takes a little longer for like men's brains to mature. And, so I'm like, okay, it's all coming together, and he made amends. And I know when people, they hear, oh, amends. No, I mean, we really had some really, he worked hard to rebuild relationships with, I can speak only for me. I know with my daughters, but I'm only going to speak of my relationship with him. Trust. It was great. And that, to me, made losing him even more traumatic. Because he was doing it until he wasn't. And during that time, when he was doing well, I had started also doing some volunteer work in Kensington, in Philly. And, just being able to, even if it was just on a Saturday and helping give out food or whatever, but just that people know that there are people out here that see them as a person and feel like that. And I get if it hasn't touched their lives in any way, I guess it is hard for people to understand. But when people say things or I hear, well, it's a choice and it makes me insane because if somebody has diabetes or heart disease or anything like that, everything, type 2 diabetes or heart things, everything, those conditions could also start with a choice as far as diet, what you choose to do. But then, genetics can take over and other things. It's the same. And it really is frustrating to me that there's not that level of empathy out there. And
I really believe in like the genetic aspect.
Mhm.
Uh, really, whatever. Like I know there's a lot of research being done, and I
Yep.
can't speak from like a research point of
Yep.
view, but I can speak from like personal experience.
Yep.
Like I don't do what I used to do, but
Yep.
like if there's Oreos in the house, like I feel different about like I'll taste them like, oh yeah, this is it forever. Like
Yeah.
like give me the whole sleeve forever, every
Yep.
day. Like how can I repeat this feeling? And I know, some people they produce dopamine less than others, and so
Yep.
there's a lot of things that go into why I might not be able to put something down, but somebody else could. And to have the empathy and the understanding is a big part in why I think there's as like we're entering into a season where there's more than there used to be, because you're talking like 2018 and like these barriers to care.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But I still think that there's still a lot of bias that people aren't even realize that they have, and that also not realizing that substance use disorder is non-discriminatory. Um, there's a genetic predisposition, just like if somebody has heart disease, there can be a genetic, high cholesterol, et cetera. It's just that, except for alcohol, the behaviors are not what I'll say socially acceptable. But I think there's still people that just are like those people and those this, and living in the Philadelphia area and and being familiar with Kensington and even what's been happening over the past year. When I hear people say things, and I'll be respectful, but I'll be like, you don't know what you're talking about. And, if you went and even just volunteered or even took a ride, you might have some different, opinions and opinion. But part of, for me, and with, Teddy passed away in September of 2021. He, picked up, and he was at his apartment. He lives with two other friends. And from what I can gather, he must have got up in the middle of the night, drove down to Kensington, came back, used heroin and had fentanyl in it, and he passed. But he had also overdosed previously. Before he had several overdoses that his very good friend Mike, who they were best friends, had given him Narcan, and he knew that. I'm saying intellectually, it's just the power of the disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just even then, that was, September of 2021. I wasn't there, but Teddy's dad and my daughter, because it was considered, a crime scene till they decided it's not, they had like a backpack and his phone and stuff at the police station, and they went to, pick it up, and the police officer just turned and said in front of them, "Go get the overdoses stuff." And I was so like, thank God I wasn't there. I mean, you walk into the police station and they have the sign up about, if you're struggling, to come here. And yet that was the interaction. Like, I was just, and that's sort of as a I guess, the summary of, yes, the circumstances were different because Teddy had passed, but that's the lens that many people see people that have substance use disorder.
Yeah. 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 There's a unhealthy tendency, I think, for humans to other. You know, I don't have any experience with it, but I got everything in the world to say about it. And because it's easier for me to other than to seek to understand, especially when I don't have any experience, whether, firsthand or secondhand with it, and people can be insensitive. And I think that can contribute to the barriers of care that exist now currently. And some of the stuff that's, I'm not super political. This show isn't a political show,
Yeah.
but there's some stuff in the zeitgeist right now that's making it complicated to really feel like care and de-siloing and restricting the barriers to care exists. Besides the work that we do.
Yeah, and I even know here in Philadelphia that there sort of the initiative of, particularly in Kensington, that, okay, we'll maybe arrest you for drug paraphernalia and then you'll go before a judge and either you have to go to rehab or you're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's going
that doesn't solve the problem. Yeah, it's not solving the problem.
And yes, you're not, and very anti-harm reduction, and not understanding, in my opinion, that trying to help people, people say meet people where they are, which I know sounds, cliche, but if somebody's willing to let you, take care of their wound, maybe tomorrow they'll be willing for something else. Or even if they're not willing to stop or change their lifestyle or pause, that doesn't mean that they're not worthy of some basics. Because I would hear all the time, oh, well, there's all these robberies and this going on. And yes, I would say that maybe some petty theft, but the people that I had interaction with, they're not going in and trying to like rob stores or steal cars, or, I mean, they're really trying to just live. And, physically just getting up and walking can be a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like, and there's people that, if you don't have health insurance, or even if you do, or if you're a Medicaid, again, you just become kind of this person that's sort of keeps getting put in all of these little spots.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do we wrap it together and make it a continuum of care? How do we make it
exactly
holistic? And so I want to respect your time, and I want to kind of lean into the legacy of Teddy and the Teddy Kradzinski Foundation and the work that you, Sharon, are doing now as a survivor of losing someone from substance use disorder. So detail how that came about, how the foundation was founded, and what type of work do you all do?
Sure. So a few months after Teddy had passed, I go out to dinner with my younger daughter and then Teddy's two good friends, Mike and Matt. And we were just, and we're just talking, they're like, it would be really great, if we could maybe, do something. And it started out really with Teddy's 30th birthday. His birthday's June 18th. So we decided we would have a walk to remember him, honor him, and others that have lost their lives, but then also have a sense of community, and for people that are walking the walk every day, doing the best they can. Yeah. So out of that, we decided that we were going to form a nonprofit, which is the Teddy Kradzinski Foundation. And what we decided that we're working on right now is we wanted to try to meet people along the continuum of the recovery. So we sponsor recovery house scholarships, which we work closely with the houses. It's a 3-week scholarship. We also work with the individual, we have someone on our team that speaks with them, weekly. And, hoping that we can, in many times, with people, either if they are coming out from an inpatient rehab or they may be coming from incarceration, they don't have anything, and we just want to try to help people at that point, get them some support, and also give a sense of community because we're here. We also are doing, as I said, Teddy was a yoga teacher. So we sponsor a yoga scholarship for teacher training for, we've had 2 now for individuals that, both in the recovery journey. And we're actually going to be also then working to offer yoga classes both online and hopefully then on site for people that are in living in recovery, and it's free of charge to them.
No, that's amazing.
We're still kind of young in the foundation, but we've provided over 20 weeks of recovery scholarships for individuals. And we just have our second person that's going to be finishing their teacher certification. And, so we're trying to hit the different, help people, early, when I'm going to say early on, but also it's a continuum. So, back and forth, and we're also looking for other opportunities where we can impact the community. I mean, our primary right now is the recovery housing scholarships. Okay. And we also are very involved in, we go and look at the houses, we meet with the people, we try to do a lot of work on that end because I think it's a little better now in Pennsylvania because we do have a certification process, but there was, and there probably still is to some extent, a lot of venture capitalists that had gotten into the area and, were having houses, but not really providing that type of environment. We do have the walk coming up this year. It's on June 21st. And nice. My son did a lot of hiking. It's on the Forbidden Drive. It's in Fairmount Park, which is in Philadelphia. And it's free. If people want to donate, they can. And it's just a really nice day. We do a nice walk along the Wissahickon Creek. And then we have a little bit of speaking, and then we have music. Teddy's band plays. And it's just a really nice sense of community. If somebody needs resources, we can try to help with that. And we're really just trying to grow so that we can help impact more people to just be there. And then also at the same time, try to grow that sense of community. We do have people on our board that are living in recovery as well. And we want to be more than just say, we're going to give money. We want to build that sense of community, let people know that we see them and we're there to support them. Hopefully as we grow, we'd really like to have almost tea with Ted. Teddy always had a cup of tea. So tea with Ted is our thing a little bit, almost have a tea, a brick and mortar tea with Ted, or an area where people could go if they want to do yoga, maybe have some meetings, music lessons. So we're still working on that.
Yeah.
But right now our immediate impact is really with the recovery and in the yoga space.
No, Oh, that sounds amazing. There's so many amazing things that came out of Teddy's impact on you, and I'm sure I've got I'm surviving a couple of people too, and it never gets easier,
Yeah.
um, I wouldn't say like the sense that it makes has been linear, but every now and then they're like like this is what it meant maybe for the day.
Yeah.
You know, and it sounds like the impact that that experience had on you is allowing you to have impact on so many others, and maybe fill some of those gaps that were missing when you were actively experiencing seeking care and not being able to find it or having barriers to recovery, etc. um, Before we get out of here, um, are there any resources that you would suggest to people who may be actively having the experience of trying to show up for somebody who's actively experiencing substance use disorder?
Resources for like that person.
Yeah. I mean, like, what are some
Right.
things that you were able to use that allow for you to continue to show up? You know?
I I did Darnon early on, um, and that was helpful. Um, I also would say for me, um, this might say, when I was able to speak about it freely, which I know is really hard, that
Mm,
also helped because it lifted that heaviness on me.
yeah.
Um, I also went to a support group that it was it was all parents that were struggling with the same thing, but it was different than Narnon because we were able to just really talk about our shared experiences.
Mm,
And I think that that is something that I would see would be extremely helpful. Um, I appreciated Narnon. I'm not saying that I didn't. I just think that um, for me, having a space where people could just talk freely and talk about their experiences or understand like, oh my gosh, the same we went through the same thing, and not in so much of a structured manner.
yeah.
um I mean, honestly, I really think the biggest help um is finding that sense of community.
Mm,
um I also like I I did do therapy, which worked well for me. But I think that there can be a lot of barriers with that, just trying to
mm,
find the right person and the
yeah.
cost. Um, but I still think I still don't think there's a ton of resources out there for um, loved ones, and even more so siblings,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is just even could be like a peer led situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for people who have lost someone to substance use disorder, there's an organization that New Form is partnered with, and they're on the New Form app. They're called The Sun Will Rise, and they're like support groups for people who've lost and are surviving people in
Yeah.
from substance use disorder.
And
So,
actually, real quick, I'm sorry because I was talking about more, but since Teddy has passed, I do go to a group. It's sponsored by Steps for Hope,
okay,
and it's an organization, and everybody there, um, it's specific for parents who have lost children to a drug related death,
yeah,
and that has been very helpful for me,
yeah,
extremely helpful.
okay.
Um,
Okay. Well, I'm inspired by your story. I appreciate you sharing in vulnerability, and like you said, like to be able to talk without the weight on your shoulders. Because there's a couple of times where it's like, I know this sounds crazy, but like this is what I was feeling. But
yep.
it's an honor to be able to hold space for you to talk freely like that. We want to thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything else you would like to leave the listeners who have listened this far with before we go?
I think just be true to yourself. And in my position, I speak of Teddy freely. I'm not ashamed of the shared experience that we had and the life that he led, and that every day I see and honor the work that people are doing, and I see and I understand it. I don't understand. I understand from my perspective and acknowledge that I know that every day people are getting up and doing the hard work every day, and that it is hard work, and that there's a lot of people that you may feel like don't see or feel that, but I try to really live my life now to honor that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And we I think we need to hear that. You know, the people who are experiencing it, like, we need to hear that. And so thank you for sharing that. And thank you for coming on the show. We'll put everything, all of the resources, all the ways they can find you.
Okay.
And find, there's tewithted.org, I believe.
tewithted.org, that's correct.
And so we'll put all those links in the show notes of this podcast. If you all have been listening and have gotten this far, you're definitely our people. We love you. Make sure to pop into the New Form app and come holler at us at the Rise, Recover, Live podcast space and tell us who you want us to have on next, and tell us what your favorite parts of this episode was. And we will catch you next time on the next episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast.